I will turn it over to our two hosts. So thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'll introduce myself real quick. My name is Debbie Andres. Sorry. I'm from New Jersey. I'm the New Jersey section rep. I am in my 4th year teaching high school physics. I teach a couple of different things, but predominantly we teach physics to 9th graders. So I teach physics. I also teach AP Physics 2 to 10th through 12th graders, and I also this year taught one of the introduction to engineering courses. So it's a lot of stuff to have to remove remotely. So that's kind of just, I wanted to fill in a little bit about, my coursework, and then also about how my district has approached remote learning. We're asynchronous, and so my students are not required to video conference with me. And so we've been doing a lot of different things, just kind of trying to adapt most of our lessons. I'm currently trying to start waves with my freshmen, but then also letting my AP students do independent projects. My district has also eliminated finals, so we won't be having finals, and our supposed last day of school is June 25th for me. So we really want to know what's going on with everybody, so that's kind of what's going on my end.
In my end, I'm in Alabama, and we are out of school as of last Friday. They're having some kind of distanced graduations in different places in football stadiums. I'm not in the classroom anymore. I serve 22 high school physics and physical science teachers, and really everybody, whatever grades they had, the 16th or 14th or whatever of March, that's the grade they got. And in Alabama, it's really hard to get students that have some kind of hardware, unless it's their phone, and can't get Wi-Fi. So there was a little bit of online teaching, but not very much. So what happened to y'all? Somebody share.
Well, I'm in New Jersey with Debbie. And just down the road, as a matter of fact, we're going with new material through the 5th or the 10th. We started around September 5th. We're also not required to do synchronous live meetings or anything like that. I'm in one of 2 districts in the county that went pass-fail. So for the 4th quarter, we are pass-fail. The kids are either getting a 50 averaged in with their first 3 quarters, or they're getting just their first 3 quarters, depending on how they did during 4th quarter. I decided that this was the perfect opportunity to switch from me choosing the topics to them choosing the topics. So my students all across all levels did either biophysics or astrophysics or a project of their own choice. The 2 kids who are doing a project of their own choice have not actually gotten anything done yet, because one of them was an AP Physics 2 student who is going to be building a radio telescope, and the other one is a vocational student who's been having all manner of drama in his life, and he was going to do something on the physics of cars, but drama has interfered with that. So I've never done biophysics before, and the last time I did astrophysics was at the college and graduate school level, so it's been a bit of an adventure with that, but we're all giving each other grace, and I'm not, there's no such thing as a penalty for late work at the moment, so that's just the way it is.
Well, we did have a question sent in about introducing new work. Arthur wanted to know, new material or reviewing it, and somebody else is trying to find out what you do when you've got to teach modern physics in a week and a half online. So maybe some people have got some comments about that.
So this is Joe West. I'm at Indiana State. We switched over right before spring break to everything online. with about 3 days notice. That worked to varying degrees. My classes, we continued on as we were. So I started frantically making videos of the remainder of the lectures for my calc-based physics class. I started meeting live via USIA with my advanced class of 4 students in StatMech. For our advanced lab, we were fortunate with the timing that we finished with labs that were primarily built around data analysis, and we had the more hands-on stuff had already been done, fortunately. And so I made videos of me doing the experiment, and they were responsible still for writing up a procedure based on the discovered videos of Dr. West doing this, and they were supposed to write up procedures for their company, and then also do the write-ups. But we kept new material rolling. I didn't change anything for the course. Our students were given the option across the university to go pass or no pass if they wanted to. Instructors were not supposed to know which they had chosen, and they could choose up until like a week before the end of classes to do that.
Somebody
I see some
asked,
questions. Yeah, go ahead, Tommy.
Tony had asked about virtual summer classes. In high school, I don't think that's happening. I think, Mark, you were sharing that some system you know of is requiring every child to go to summer school, and how they're going to pay for that and all that kind of good stuff.
Yes, so I'm in Washington, D.C., and Arlington County, Virginia, which is just across the river, announced that for Arlington County students, they have mandatory summer school for every student in the county to make up for lost educational time over the last few months of remote learning, and to try to keep people every on schedule to start the school year. However, they said that if you have a note from your parents, you can be exempted. So it'll be interesting to see how that actually plays out.
I'm at a university where my grant is, and all the universities in Alabama and colleges are going online. They still say they're doing something this fall, but I think that's mainly to appease the football fans that may or may not happen. So.
Yeah, for myself, I teach at Rutgers. I teach a graduate course over the summer to pre-service physics teachers. And I teach about how to incorporate engineering into physics classes, and that class got moved to remote. So I'm not sure yet. They're gonna have a funky supply list is what they won't have to buy a textbook for me, but they're gonna have to be looking for a lot of weird things this month before the class starts. I saw a couple of questions on here on the chat. I'm trying to kind of keep a eye on it too. And somebody had asked about, student engagement with the asynchronous approach. I just kind of want to talk a little bit about on my end and how that looked. So, I work with freshmen, and I take pride in the fact that, I've established a really good relationship with them. So that's something to kind of think about if this is a discussion for another time, but if we do start remotely, but at least I still kind of had the freshmen before we left to going into remote learning. So that meant that they still kind of knew that I was holding them accountable for their work. But as the time has slipped, and I don't know if I'm sure other people have felt the same thing, it's been getting a little harder to get them to keep working. And so what my approach to this has been now is, I have to really take apart, everything that I've been wanting them to learn, and let's stick to the basics. Let's stick to what's going to help them next year when they take chemistry, because that's a sequence at my school. And then also getting them to move around and do stuff. As soon as we went into remote learning, I was going to start circuits. So it was nice. I had they all didn't have light bulbs. They all didn't have wires and stuff. So I couldn't really have them do anything hands-on. So I really was pushing for my department to get us to go to waves, because this week I got to assign make your own pendulum, take a video of it. And when you see a student hanging a vitamin bottle from a string and that's their pendulum, I got a kick out of that. So just been trying to my focus for now through June, especially because it's getting warmer, it's nicer, the distancing rules are being relaxed, but they still have to be in school, right? And I'm asynchronous, so it's not like I can say you have to sit down from 12 to 12:30 with me. I'm trying to make it so that my activities are really trying to get them to be more engaged at home, and all that. So that's been definitely a focus for me, especially with this new unit.
Yeah, hi Debbie, this is Alan. I teach in Westchester County in New York State, so not too far from you. And just like you, I teach the freshman physics and some engineering courses. So I think that we're seeing some of the same challenges. By the way, for your waves, you can do, I don't know if you've seen that video on NPR on finding the speed of light with peeps, but you can put a chocolate bar or marshmallows in the microwave oven, and if you measure the distance between the melted parts, those are the antinodes of a wave, so that's half the wavelength, and multiply it by the microwave frequency, and you get pretty close to but I also have been thinking.
I will say one thing, make sure you take the rotating dish out of the microwave before you do it.
Yeah. Absolutely. But it's pretty, I just put a chocolate bar in there, but I got within 10%. It was pretty good. But my real, in the fall, like you got these 8th graders coming into 9th grade. They've never been in a high school. They don't know me. And, where's that relationship? It was one thing, in March when there was a really pretty, good solid bond there, but I don't know what's going to happen in the fall. It's going to be tough.
That's definitely a discussion that I would love to have, just like focused on that at some point, either later on or once we know for sure we are remote. Because establishing relationships with your students, that's the whole first week. Especially for incoming 9th graders who we work with, because they were going from middle school and now to like big scary high school. Which, as much as they don't want to admit it, it's true. They're scared of high school. So now we're just going to be like these floating heads. So
it could be more than a week too. It takes a marking period, really, I think. So, because in the middle school, I think they get grades based on behavior or something, and now they've actually got to, it's a little more tied to demonstrated performance.
Yeah, and more importantly, I want them to be okay with being wrong, or make mistakes, or take risks. And luckily, I'm still seeing my students still take risks, intellectual risks, with their work that they've submitting. But that's definitely a big concern for me.
So I will offer one possible option for the beginning of the school year, because I think, as Alan said, going into extended learning after you've already had relationships is one thing, but starting the year off that way is completely different. And the one of the projects that I'm involved with a lot through AAPT is the Step Up project, and there's 2 lessons, one on careers in physics and one on women in physics. But both of them are highly focused on community building, and they might be a reasonable starting place for some of you to try to start to build that community and that relationship, and that, as Debbie mentioned, that willingness to make mistakes and to take risks and to be slightly vulnerable, but still learn together as a group. And the Step Up lessons, I think, do a very good job of doing that, particularly the careers in physics lesson, which we've now, by the way, spent a lot of time virtualizing. And now there's a lot of really good, many of the paper resources are now available as an interactive website. So.
Anybody else other than the Deep South have a problem with it? Their students don't have, tablets or computers or any kind of internet and a way to get on. A lot of times they were giving out wonderful worksheet packets, but those are the the worst thing for kids and no way of learning. So what did anybody else have the same problem with not having access to the kids?
We had a few issues here in Australia. We've all now come back to school full-time in New South Wales. And teachers have had a lot of trouble where they've given out computers from the schools bank to students to take home. And now they're unable to use the computers now that the kids are back because they haven't been able to get them back and they don't have their class sets anymore. So they're finding that on the other side, with a lot of the resources, that they are struggling to get them back into the classroom and get back to normal.
We're a one-to-one district, so all of our kids had Chromebooks. Some of them didn't have Wi-Fi at home. Our district did set up Wi-Fi for those kids. I think they used a school-provided mobile something linked in the Chromebook itself somehow. I'm not entirely sure how that worked. I know there were other districts that were using hotspots set up on school buses, and then the school buses went along their route and just like set up somewhere on the route to provide Wi-Fi for that route. Not something that can be done long-term sustainably, but better than nothing, I suppose.
Big difference in a lot of districts where they've got lots of money and where they're, one high school for the whole county kind of thing. So big problems.
So,
had trouble with were the rural students. So I'm in the middle of Illinois. Some students are city students, some are town students, and some are quite distant farm students. And some of the farm students did not have internet at home at all. All they had was their cell phone. And the college, the community college I work at, managed to set up temporary stations at connections. I don't know if it was, I believe it was through things like disc television, or some television companies have, I would say all of them, all the dish and cable companies, TV companies have the option for internet. And the school was able to get some of the money it had set aside for other things this year to use for that. There weren't a lot of students they had to do it for, but they did it for the few that needed it.
Yeah, these issues of equity and access are really important, and I think they deserve a lot of our conversation. Whether it's internet access, whether it's even with internet access, if you have synchronous classes, are there enough devices in the home for all the kids simultaneously to be doing synchronous things? It's I think a really, really important problem that, to be honest, I think as a community, we've all done our best, and school districts have done their best, but I think it's very much an unanswered question is, has this experience been equitable?
Yeah, I mean, like my district, we have, every student has a device, but I think in some homes there are multiple students, and if they're younger, they don't have their own Chromebook. So the high school student might have to share it with a younger sibling. I'm actually seeing a little bit more about how some students haven't been able to adapt to the remote environment for various reasons. But I teach an in-class support class, so I have students that have IEPs, individual education plans, and I've just been seeing that my students from that who are classified, they're just really struggling with not having that face to face. And sometimes they just need that redirection. Like that's explicitly written as a modification. But if they're not doing their work, if I don't know when they're doing their work, I can't be there and say, hey, George, you know, get back on track. And that particular piece has been a little bit difficult with the asynchronous approach. Like I can't keep them on task. I don't know what they have also going. I'm not supposed to know, but like I don't know if they have other things distracting them. And so that's been something I'm trying to figure out still.
We had a question about cheating, and talked to one teacher that was really working with pre-service elementary teachers, and she said that her grades were a lot better after they went to online and, you know, could look all the answers up kind of thing. But
or have their parents do it for them.
Yeah, colleges with you know, only online courses, they have specific, you got to have a camera that watches you at a certain time and all this, but I don't know the answer to that, college or high school.
The takeaway I had from an earlier one of these was to have the kids produce a video, and I had them just make a camera stand, and it was amazing to see. You could see the camera stands in the pictures, a paper towel roll or a stack of food cans or something, but then to work the problem while they narrated their solution. And a lot of my kids who didn't do that well when we were in the classroom really shined with this, where they were forced to verbalize what steps they were taking. Now granted, it was simple force diagrams and coefficient of friction type problems, but that process of having to narrate the solution while they drew it on a piece of paper, I feel eliminated a lot of the cheating, or at least having the tutor doing their work for them. But it also seemed to pedagogically have a very powerful outcome.
Just want to piggyback on what Tim said, because I did the same thing for my final, and my reasoning was that, you know, so let's say a tutor or a smart friend or a sibling or somebody does completely tell the student how to answer that, you know, all the steps. Still, the process of that student saying in their own voice, saying that back so that I can hear it, you know, maybe they were taught effectively by the tutor, but you can really tell when someone describes it to themselves, does this person actually understand what they're saying or not? And I don't know that it's a perfect solution, but I felt like it was more authentic than anything that I had tried up until then for the semester. The downside for me, a tremendous amount of time to grade. The students thought, the more I say, the more convincing I will be. And so I got a lot of 15-minute videos.
At the end of third marking period, I scheduled conferences with each of my students, and it took me, you know, 3 days or more to get through all of my students. But I just scheduled 15 minutes and spent 10 or less talking to them about things. And that's something they can't necessarily look up on Chegg or wherever while you're talking. And this is also the approach that my husband is using he's teaching multivariable calculus at Rutgers. Debbie, if you took Math 251, that's the course he's teaching online. He's for every exam, he's going to ask the kids what one problem that they did well, one problem that they struggled with. And then he's going to ask them about those problems, and so they can be a little bit prepared for what they have to talk about. But he's also going to pick a problem and say, you know, what would be different about your answer if I changed this about the problem? Which means that he gets to watch them and listen to them think about it out loud and live, which, you know, better than just something that they could literally copy off Chegg at their own pace. So I'm thinking about doing that for next year.
So I
Yeah.
use
Okay.
a Respondus system. So fortunately, I had taught an online course before all this hit, so I was able to adapt fairly quickly to the new courses I had to do this way. But with Respondus, there's a lockdown browser, so they cannot leave whatever's currently on their screen. And they do a little environment video of like 2 minutes to show me what's in their immediate vicinity before they take it. And then they're all videotaped while they take their test. And of course, the threat is that I will then go and watch all that video and see anybody who's cheating. And it gives you a cheat because it actually monitors how much face time you get with it. So you can spot check one or two of them. But the test is time limited, so hopefully they don't have enough time to do much with Chegg if they could find a way to get there. And at least theoretically, I could go and watch all that video. In practice, I watch about 5 minutes of that video in total. But the ominous threat is there, and that's, so far at least, seems to be reasonably effective.
I know that at Rutgers, for one of the physics finals, they all the professor scheduled Zoom meetings, so they all just sat and they just took the test like on Zoom with the teacher proctoring them just in their own respective locations. So there's been a lot of different ways to approach it. For my course that I'll be teaching, for my grad course I'll be teaching, I think that the final is going to look more like a discussion, where we would do them in groups, and I would monitor the discussion in terms of looking for physics content, how they're doing conflict resolution, because these are our future teachers, so I can kind of include that in my assessment.
Yeah,
That's actually how Rutgers is doing the exams as well. My husband has to sit there and watch them take their exam for the summer.
I think if we could return the cheating also, and whether you watch the students or whatever, means they have internet access to, I'm very concerned about the equity issues that I think all the inequities in our society have been exacerbated in the last 3 months because of this. And yes, in Boston, we gave out 20,000 computers to the students who needed them, but then computers didn't work and they didn't know how to get them back. They didn't have good internet access, even though Verizon and Xfinity said you can have internet access for free, but it still didn't work. We have students who they don't have a quiet home. They don't have a corner to work in. We have students who don't have parents who can help them, or parents, this is the one I'm struggling with. I mean, how to teach better, how to use the chat box, how to use a Google Doc. We can all figure those things out, but we have incredible inequities. There are kids who have not been heard from in their teachers for 2.5 months. We have no idea what's going on. And we're a bunch of people, teachers with a lot of experience. Do we have any solutions to this that we can think of, that we can even try to implement? Because I just, and then, besides, learning issues and the IEPs and those kids, and this does not help them, but the poverty is really distressing for the students that we see.
Hey, Arthur, this is Jake. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I live in Kansas. We were socially distanced from day one, about the last 200 years. So the COVID thing didn't hit us too bad, but we did shut down school. And so we opened up, I was doing online. I'm an informal science educator now. I'm too old to be in the classroom safely. So I was having 50 to 100 kids per week come to our online physics. Now I've got 25,000. And so it is doable. Because if you can do it in Kansas, you can do it anywhere, I'm telling you. And one thing that we've done for the underserved, I found an angel in Ace Hardware. And we went to the Ace corporate headquarters, and we started a program called Hardware Science, Physics Hardware Store. The school's shut down. I don't have any money. And you go to the hardware store, and they will do 2 or 3 physics lessons a week with stuff in the store. So it's not the deepest stuff, but kids love it. a new way to shoot the cat, you know, with the thing or whatever it is. And hardware stores are essential places. So even though the school's shut down and everything else is, the hardware stores are staying open. We're in about 800 stores now. And so I hope that will keep growing. Our target, ACE has 6,000 stores. So there'll be, at least it isn't gonna solve all the problems, but at least it will give underserved kids a little taste of physics. And once they taste just a little bit of it, then they're hooked for life, I think. So anyway, I thought there is, I guess I just want to say there is, if you're creative, you can find some resolution to that inequality problem.
How do we find out? Go to an ACE store and ask them?
Yeah, we're just
Online?
starting. I'm learning how difficult it is. We're not trying to replace the physics curriculum. We're trying to supplement existing ones. You know, just what did you study in physics? And they said, oh, especially young kids, man, I didn't get that density thing or accelerate. You know, they said I didn't get that thing. And so I think I've got about 160 lessons done now. Hardware science lessons. We make little videos, and they're kind of bad and they're hokey. The kids love them. You know, it's old Mr. Wizard stuff from 1951, essentially. Then we update a little bit, and it's kind of an underground operation. I'm sure we're doing things unsafe and marginally illegal, but the children sure love it. And yeah, we'll be making it more public as we grow it. We have to go to the hardware store conventions where the store owners, or that's how we contact the store owners. And the conventions, of course, got shut down this year. So it kind of knocked us down, but we were up to 800 before the COVID hit. So we'll keep after it. So if you're close to ACE hardware, yeah. So enough of that.
Somebody put something in the chat that may be the link.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll keep after it so you can learn about it and all that stuff. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So for you know, this is bringing to me the ideas of one of the committees of science in the public.
Yeah.
And so I'm starting to think now, like, is it possible to have, you know, some kind of science, kind of have like science demos in the park? People are going to the park, having something that but still, I don't know how you would swing this with a town, but you know, can we do something like that? Is that something that's feasible within our regions, having, you know, being able to go out there and kind of like Dave's demo shows, but like outside? And at least making that connection with some students.
Another resource is libraries. I was stunned by the we had one librarian want to do it in the library, and now we've got 150 librarians. They're trying to do anything to get kids in the library, and they love doing the STEM physics activities in the library. And they have the staff and place besides the hardware store. They can also go to Arthur's house.
A few weeks ago, we had one of our sessions was with students, and it was a feedback session from both high school students and undergrads talking about their experiences. And one of the things that they mentioned and said that, you know, if they could give kind of one bit of advice to teachers, it was to try to get the students talking to other students. And that was a way around some of the equity issues, because students seem to be able to connect better to each other than faculty to student. It was a way around some of the cheating issues, because you just enable students to say, look, work together. This is a group thing. And it also addressed some of the isolation issues that many students were feeling because they weren't with their friends and they didn't know how to interact with each other. And if it became a school assignment to work together, then all of a sudden it was a sanctioned event. And I'm curious if any of you have had experiences or positive experiences around this idea of students, of somehow empowering students to work together, whether that's synchronously or asynchronously.
Yeah, I assigned a project and I said, you know, it's 4 students to every team. And then it's like, now work it out. Try to do that. And then they have to figure out how to do it by phone or Zoom or whatever they can do. There are still issues with that, of course, in any kind of group project where one person did all the work and stuff like that. But I was very pleased with the quality of the projects and they get to know each other and stuff like that. And if you do that, I would think if I did that more often, then, you know, and kept varying the teams, you kind of see who rises to the top and who's doing the work. But is anybody else asking students to do group projects during these crazy times?
Arthur, I love the idea of having students active in this process and working together. We're sort of in a bit of a quandary at the moment in trying to level the playing field a little bit due to the lack of equity for students learning in New South Wales as they prepare for their final exams, which decide all of their university entries, and no one seems to be budging in terms of that process. And so they are still going to, you know, be affected by this. And we're looking at ways to address it. We've only got a really narrow window of like a, you know, probably about 3 hours worth of material that we can produce for students across the state and a little Q&A type session. But I'm wondering whether that idea of actually, instead of doing like a summary catch up, actually like setting them a task might be a really valuable way of doing this, where you can get some more value and they're engaged in it, rather than just trying to cover some content that they might have missed. I'm really loving that idea. Thanks for bringing that up. I think might be really a good approach.
Bryn had submitted a question about the equity of projects. You want to add something to her question, Bryn?
Well, I'm curious too. We're talking about equity and cheating, and I'm curious if anyone kind of, you know, there's the sit in front of the Zoom camera while you take your test approach, but there's also kind of, I think, the other end of the approach, which is to say, here's some questions, here's an assessment, work together, use anything you can find on the internet. Not even open-ended questions. I mean, very specific, like solve this problem type question. But give students the opportunities to address it in a more upfront way, to say like, look, use the resources you have. Don't pretend you don't have them.
Yeah, I've been struggling for the last few years, Mark, with this idea that, you know, we used to have closed book and open book tests. In an open book test, they could have their notes and you would ask different kinds of questions. And then a few years ago, I started saying, no, my test should be open internet. Everybody is going to have the internet 24/7. Many of our physics students have the internet. So let's make them open internet tests. The problem is that I can come up with questions which I think are interesting questions, which you shouldn't find on the internet and see this. But then 2 hours after you assign it, it's on Chegg, and some graduate student somewhere is supplying the answer. And it's like, no, that's cheating. You know, and you know, that, you know, I said, you're allowed to use the internet, but you're not allowed to ask somebody on the internet to solve it for you. Yeah. But they ask Chegg and they don't think that's the same thing as asking a person. But I think we all have to figure out better kinds of questions. Asking what the specific heat of aluminum is on a test makes no sense in 2020 when you have the internet. So that's another issue. And, you know, there has to be, you know, the cheating is going to go on. I mean, even, you know, somebody's on the internet, it's like you're watching me on on this, but there's a guy next to me who's taking the entire test to me and I'm handing it in, or, oh, you're on this computer, but you have another computer on the right doing this. There are so many, you know, in evolution, both the prey and the predator get faster, and we just, they're going to cheat and we're going to figure out a way they can cheat. But it's just going to keep evolving.
So this actually makes me really think about, you know, why does cheating exist in the first place? It exists because there's a grade at stake. And I'm maybe oversimplifying, but there's a grade at stake. They're cheating. Somebody might choose to cheat or take that route because they are afraid of not, you know, performing well on paper. But for me in my district right now, it's been made very apparent to us that grades are kind of like, we're just kind of handing them out now, for lack of a better word. That's kind of the directive that we've been given. And so with that in mind, that for me, if I'm just kind of looking at students that they're completing their assignments, I'm going to ask the questions that are more interesting to me now. So it's not going to be the specific heat about, you know, something, or we just did charges and fields, right? So yeah, it's great. They can look positive, negative. I'm still going to ask those things on my checkpoint ticket. But for me, I'm more interested in a question like, what are some of the basic algebra skills that you use to help you with tackling Ohm's law questions, right? What were some of the difficult things that you encountered in this project? How do you plan on doing that? So it's because now, at least in my current situation, the grades aren't so much at stake because we're, like I said, I'm not saying this is in a bad way, like we are just handing them out. Like our district is making it really clear that students shouldn't be penalized for late work and they shouldn't be penalized for not doing work on time. Just like asking different questions. I want to know a little bit more about how they're thinking about, you know, what skills are they taking from this? Those are the questions I'm asking now. And so on.
Yeah, I forgot about the question that I submitted, and you'd asked, hey, you had a question about equity. I just looked back at what was my original question. And a lot of you guys are talking about assessments, and, you know, we went to school, we had our traditional ways of doing things, and I've been questioning a lot, like multiple choice and free response. You know, I teach AP physics, I teach college prep physics class for high school. And so I've been looking more into kind of project-based assessments, and I'm wondering how many of you guys are doing the same instead of a test, because like you guys have said, you know, there's chegg.com, even, and I do like how, I don't know if you've used Flipgrid, but for the videos where, you know, you can watch them doing a free body diagram. Sure, maybe they're watching Khan Academy first and then doing it themselves. And there's some learning from that, but I'm wondering how many of you are putting together kind of project-based learning and how you're assessing that for students, if you're doing that at all.
Well, for my final, I was teaching 100 students physics. I was teaching physics biology majors. Half the final, the first half of the final was take half the chapters of the 14 chapters we did. I want to know for each chapter, what was the most important physics, why, what was the most interesting physics and why in that chapter, and how does that physics relate to biology, because they're all bio majors. The second half of my final for each student was develop a sport for the moon, which comes out of active physics. And they did remarkably good jobs. And, you know, that has criteria, and you have to explain the factors, and you have to explain why, and you have to show the equations, and you can see what they know. And so, so I think project-based learning is certainly a way to do it. It's the first time I gave the sports on the moon to individual students, because I would have rather they work in a group of 3 or 4 because it's better learning. But it was a final, and we're just trying to adjust now. So I haven't figured out how to do that. But we did another project-based learning in another course, and that was a much smaller course, and the students did well, and they had to present on video and stuff. But I love the project-based learnings, as most of you know.
Yeah, I think we've introduced a new approach in New South Wales with depth studies being a mandatory component of our assessment, where a student has to, the focus really is on depth. I think what you're saying there, Arthur, about that, providing students an element of choice in how they want to demonstrate their understanding, and make that really clear that the purpose of the assessment is actually to reflect on the learning process and to justify what you've learned and what you've taken from the exercise, is actually giving students a bit more ownership of what they're doing, and makes it more authentic. And I think one way in which we're balancing that group work and the need for a grade and to distinguish between students for our school-based assessment is that we change the weighting of the product of that project-based learning and a reflection process type assessment, so that it's not just you produce this amazing product and great, you submitted it, maybe your tutor did it, maybe someone helped you do it. That doesn't matter so much, because we reduce the grade weighting of that, and instead when they submit it, they also complete a reflection on identifying what was the part that was most challenging, where did you think you learned, how did you use problem-solving strategies, and focusing on the process. And I think that's really what, going forward, the content stuff or the product isn't that important, but it frees you up to allow students to be more creative with the product. And I think we find that if what they make is something that they can share with their family or their friends and get some sort of prestige from it, then they are super motivated as a result, and that they don't get that from something which is intended to be a test. No one really wants to see what they did on a test. But yeah, I think that's one of the ways we're approaching it, is changing that weighting of the assessment.
One problem we're having at community colleges with switchover is keeping the engineering physics and the calculus-based physics in line enough to keep the courses transferable to the four-year colleges across the country. If we skip topics, then there's a good chance that a significant number of four-year colleges will not accept the course because it won't have covered everything that it was required to cover to count as that course. I've had students go to Stanford. I've had students go to Colorado School of Mines, and schools like that are not going to be anxious to take a course that has been trimmed from 14 main topics to 10 main topics. That is a big problem for community colleges right now. Very big problem with project-based in science, because you have to still somehow have the projects cover the full range of the required 14 subjects within the mechanics class. And we haven't been able to figure out quite how to maintain the quantity and the quality both at the same time.
I think things are going to change for grading and everything, because right now this is like a big experiment. This got thrust upon us very quickly, and a lot of people were not prepared. There's a part of me that, being retired, said, oh, I didn't have to do this, but at the same time, watching what's going on, and I have a lot of empathy for people trying to cope and present and keep their classes. This idea of of grading and grades, if we keep this up, it's going to have to change, because it's going to be very difficult to go back and assess the ways we used to, all right? Like what, it'd be interesting to see what the AP scores are going to look like after all of this is said and done, because that was a big change from what was done in the past. So I'm very curious. I used to give a take-home test to my AP students every semester, a quarter, and I remember parents coming to me one time and saying, "Do you realize that they're talking to each other about this?" And I said, "Well, yeah." And they looked at me like, "What, are you crazy?" I said, "Well, no, that's part of what I intended. I wanted them to work together." But that's a long time before all of this other stuff, where students can easily obtain answers and things like that. But I think we're in for a big change.
Yes, I agree. I think that as we roll out of the spring and then start looking forward to next year, I think there's going to be a lot of really important conversations that we all have about what are the best ways to teach our students, what are the new materials that we want to teach our students, what is a reasonable question to ask, and why is it a useful bit of knowledge for that student to know. I think everything could be on the table here, and I think this is part of the value of these conversations that we're having, is to flesh out some of these issues and to really talk about what's important to us and how we can best serve our students.
I think the part that concerns me most is sort of a couple of times the idea of students working together has come up. And for me, I think one of the most useful things that students have is that time in the classroom and or out of the classroom with each other while they're working through these ideas. And so I encourage my students to work together in class. I try to get them to work together outside of class. And that's really the part of pushing things more online that concerns me the most, that they are going to lose that opportunity where they are talking it through. Because I tell them the best thing you can do to learn this material is to explain it to somebody else. That is better than listening to me. That is better than watching videos. If you can explain why you did it and how you did it to somebody else, that will put it in your head better than anything else. And that's the part I'm most worried about losing with all of this.
I think an interesting counterpoint is that we may actually have more of that because they spend less time listening to us, right? Because I think that there's a tremendous freedom for students to communicate with each other. I think they naturally communicate with each other. And I think that if we are posing the interesting questions to them, I want to say that also is an inequity, because different students have different levels of comfort communicating with each other. But I don't know that because we're giving students freedom to communicate, or because we're reducing one kind of restriction, we may actually be opening up another kind of opportunity for them.
I think some of these, sorry, go ahead.
After you.
No, I was just going to say that some of the project-based learning, that I'm really very fond of, are things that you can actually get students to do in small groups also. And that can be very valuable. In fact, I have found project-based learning to be extremely valuable in my own classes. And, even when you give them very little guideline and you say, I want you to do some projects that relate physics to everyday life or physics to art, I have seen the kinds of things that students have done to be absolutely mind-blowing. They do things that I would never have thought about. And in fact, I gave one example of it last time, and I would give it again because some people here might be new, and because this one just stuck in my mind, even though I have like infinitely many examples of kinds of things that students have done that have been really good. For example, this student came up with this project that was really about caring for a friend. It was really about empathy and trying to cheer your friend up, but the person really, she used physics for this. So the point is that there are two friends, Billy, who's really a solid cylinder, and Kyle, who's a hoop. And things have really not been going right for Billy, for a long time. And so Billy just doesn't want to hang out with anybody or doesn't want to do anything. And so Kyle is thinking about ways to cheer Billy up. And Kyle knows that there is a rolling, there is a ramp in the backyard of, his friend Billy. So he's thinking, oh, let's go and, roll down the inclined plane. And Billy is like, no, I have always lost. Things have just gone horribly for me. I know I'm going to lose. I am not going to participate in these kinds of things. And Kyle is the one who knows physics. And Kyle knows that, a solid cylinder is always going to win compared to a hoop, no matter what the length of the solid cylinder and what the radius of the hoop or radius of the, solid cylinder. So he keeps insisting, no, let's go, let's just try. And finally, very reluctantly, Billy finally agrees, and they go down, and lo and behold, Billy wins, and he's like, oh yes, finally I won. Yes, finally something is going right. And Kyle is so happy that, the friend won, and now the friend is feeling good. So the two of them high five, go inside, drink milk, and eat cookies, right? And that's it. So, and then they remain friends ever after. But the point is, this is really about empathy and friendship and how you can actually make your friend happy, but it's also about physics. And so you can see that my students have come up with like millions of such examples in which they are really using physics and relating it to things that I would never ever think about. So I think that I really encourage people to do these kinds of things.
It's funny. I was going to say something totally different, but I can imagine that your students have heard you sharing that story with your colleagues, and you could just imagine how proud they would be of the fact that they have amazed their teacher, and I think you've given them that opportunity to really. That's something that they'll take forward. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, this wasn't part of an assessment, but I once had an APC student write a love poem to his girlfriend about her beauty was like Gauss's law, that radiated in all directions, with the sum of the flux of her beauty totaling some number. I was impressed.
Well, at the art school in Boston, this girl I went to observe, and this girl said, I'm going to show you something that she did. And she puts on her tap shoes, and she puts out a piece of cardboard on the floor. And she said, the ground outside the cardboard is air. The cardboard is water. I'm going to show you refraction of light. And she does a tap dance, and both feet are moving fast. Then one foot gets on the cardboard, it's moving slowly, the other foot's still moving fast. Then they both get on the cardboard, and they're both moving slowly as she keeps moving. Then that one leaves the cardboard, goes fast. And I said, I've never seen refraction explained this way. She changed the direction, she changed the speed. I was blown away. Never would I have imagined this as an analogy for that. But she was a dancer, and she made the physics her own through the project, which they all were doing. And that's something very special.
Has anyone watched the annual competition from AAAS, Dance Your Thesis?
I've heard it, but I've never seen it.
Oh, so it's a yearly thing that's been going on for a long time, where at the AAAS annual meeting, they give an award to a PhD student who performs an interpretive dance that they post to YouTube of their dissertation. And there's years and years and years of people that have participated in this competition. Just Google it, AAAS, Dance Your Thesis. And the winners usually employ other professional dancers to help them.
Will I understand the thesis?
They give awards for like best biology one, best physics one, best chemistry one. So they're topical.
I don't think I'll understand the physics, much less the biology or the chemistry. But maybe the dance will help.
Yeah. Just on that social interaction issue with students being pushed online, it was interesting. The students the other week were talking about that they really missed that awkward, forced social interaction that they have in classes, where they say you have to work with you and you. And I keep thinking of it like that they like to have that instruction like I do in terms of like the nutbush. I'm assuming in the States you do the nutbush city limits dance. You don't do that dance? Where they give you all of the instructions, the Macarena maybe?
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Where that forced social interaction is a really comfortable spot for people to start engaging and developing those personal skills. And I think with the online instruction, it's still possible. But you really need to set up that protocol to force them into interacting with perhaps people that they don't normally talk to, and in productive ways. Just an observation from the students the other week.
It concerns me a little bit, though, because you're forcing interaction that now reaches into their home. So it's one thing to force interaction in the classroom. It's another one where I say you now have to let this group of people into your home and interact with them. That bothers me, maybe more even at the college level than the high school level. But that's one that I'm not sure I know how to get around.
Yeah, it was a concern for us. We New South Wales blocked for students being able to share video and blocked them being able to initiate using our systems a one-to-one chat with other students for I think those types of concerns. But yeah, it is an issue that goes on elsewhere, I imagine.
Problem we have with interaction outside of class in Illinois is a tendency to want to just use chat. And when they find that they can't talk about physics very well on chat, if you don't provide some sort of push or nudge or requirement or even tool that they can use other than chat, they will use chat on their cell phones, and if they can't talk about it, they just won't. And we'll just resolve it in their minds. Well, we don't have the tool to do it, therefore it doesn't matter. Being told to do something will not drive them to do it. Getting a grade for it will drive them to do what is absolutely minimally required to get at least a C. They need each other to drive each other to do well. They need. I've had a lot of students tell me that almost all motivation to actually do well and try to learn comes from each other, not from me. The best I can provide is opportunities and reaffirm that they're on the right path. I've had a lot of very good students tell me when they talk to me after class or a year after class after they've gone off to a four-year college, that all their motivation came from each other, not from me. My being in the lab, my being in the class gave them confidence that they were not going off track, but that's all it did. But they still say they need the instructor there in order to have the confidence to continue with each other. Or they'll very easily think that they're getting off track, start double and triple guessing themselves, and then just give up. This is what students have told me.
So I don't mean to cut this conversation off, but we've come to the end of our scheduled time. I want to thank everyone again for another week of great conversation. Like I said before, I really think that these times that we're in demand communities like ours that are both focused on discourse and action. And I'm thankful for being a part of this community because of that. Next week, we have another coffee hour, this one back at 4 o'clock. And I think this one will be interesting in particular because we're going to be focusing on the use of LAs and TAs in an online environment. And in particular, we're going to try to explore an interesting topic, which is all of us are facing a reality where many of our students may not actually return to our colleges. And the option of is there a way to employ LAs and TAs to help us in our teaching, but also to keep students connected to our institutions and to their education? And I think this also plays out in high school, because we're going to have a bunch of high school students that take gap years that are going to need something to do. And I think there's an opportunity there of engaging those students back with their high schools in a similar way that LAs and TAs operate at the university level. So I think that'll be a very interesting conversation next week, and I hope all of you come back. Say thank you again to Tommi and Debbie for hosting this conversation. It was wonderful to have both of them.
Thanks everybody for coming. And if you want to talk, reach out.
Thank you. Great day.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.